the more we can share our stories or experiences about being in therapy, I think will help encourage others to do so.
Right.
The more we normalize the pain in the African community, in the Black community, people of color community, there's a lot of things that we've had to deal with and we continue to deal with that is not normal. You know what I mean? It's a lot. The more we normalize that, because there's so much trauma, it's shocking to me that people are like, oh, that's normal. All my friends experience that. And I'm like,
and
that's not good.
Giving me attention, and then they're making me those, and you need those, and the beat that pump by one.
welcome to another episode of the Pepper Soup Talk Show. We are excited to have another incredible guest, a very special guest here today on our talk show. Her name is Akindumila. She is a licensed marriage and family therapist practicing in Philadelphia. She worked with individuals and also couples, and she also focused on student athletes
Yeah.
as well.
Yes. Yeah.
So with no further ado, Ayo, welcome to the talk show.
Thanks for having me. I'm so glad to be here.
Yes. So just to kick us off, Ayo, tell us a little bit about who you are and where you're from.
Yeah, I'm Nigerian by way of my parents. I was born here in the U.S. I grew up in Dallas, and I loved it. It's a great place to have grown up, a great place to live. I'm here in Philly now because I wanted a change of scenery. So when I graduated with my master's degree, I came out to the East Coast, and I've been here since like 2015. Philly since 2017, but the East Coast since 2015.
Oh, where were before Philly?
I lived in New Jersey for a little bit and also Boston for a little bit.
Oh, Boston, cold.
Yeah. It's cold in many ways.
Wow. So you have a lot of experience, like living on the East Coast.
Yeah, traveling around, seeing different places, different people.
Right. You spent a little bit of time in the South as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Just Texas, though.
Texas. Okay.
Yeah. I've only lived in Texas and the South.
Okay.
Yeah, but I visited a lot of states actually. I like to travel.
Right. Yeah. That's exciting. So again, I use someone who got a little bit of experience, different perspective from different part of the cities. So let's just dive into you being a therapist. Like, initially, was this like your goal becoming a therapist, or like, in school, were you studying something else?
Yeah. Sorry. When I was in undergrad, I didn't know what to do, like some people. And I just settled on pursuing nursing because it just felt like the most right at the time. But I really went back and forth a lot, and I changed my major a few times, and ultimately I finished with a degree in university studies. It's just a compilation of different areas of focus. So I did exercise and sports science, social work, and legal studies.
Wow.
Still trying to go into nursing, but I didn't know what I was doing.
Right.
And then after graduating, I went to this Christian camp for high schoolers, teenagers. I was a counselor there, and speaking to the kids, I was just blown away by their vulnerability, and just hearing some of the things going on in their personal lives and with their families is kind of what led me to pursue counseling. I really wanted to focus on family therapy, right? To help families and help teenagers. And then as I continued with my studies, I laugh because family therapy is really hard. It's really hard to practice, and working with some people is hard also. But I've been exposed to a lot of different type of people and scenarios, and through that, I just decided to focus on athletes at the collegiate level and beyond. So really, if you're active as a collegiate athlete or professional athlete, or if you're retired as a collegiate athlete or professional athlete, that's really my niche.
So one thing, I think one of your specialties is marriage counseling also, or couples counseling. Before we started. Congrats on your engagement, if I heard that correctly.
Yeah.
Yes, thanks. Yes,
I guess the public knows now.
Yeah, recently engaged.
If nobody knows, but this airs much later. Um, and with that being said, how was it? I'm just interested. How was it, having that specialty and then, being in a relationship? Do you like counsel yourself or like, this is this, that, and the third? Or how's that dynamic?
Yes. Oh my gosh, that's a great question.
Yes, Toby.
I absolutely love couples work. It's just so fascinating to me because two people with all of their stuff and the places that they come from are trying really hard to blend. And obviously, everywhere there's dysfunction, right, in that. So in my relationship, he tells me to stop being the therapist, which is really hard, It's just something that's natural. And whenever we do get into arguments or we have, challenges, I do think of what I would tell one of my couples, and it really does help me change my behavior, listen to him, find compromise. So it's helpful. But sometimes it's like, you might be doing too much.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And with that, because I forgot what the name of the clip. There was another couple, I don't know, somewhere on YouTube. The guy was also like a marriage counsel therapist, and then the woman wasn't. And then, with that kind of dynamic, there's always is an interesting setup, like you're going from a professional way instead of in an intimate way, and then just how to level the painful. Because, by practice, like this and this works. And then there's a emotional aspect of the relationship, like, okay, this is what's actually needed. So it's kind of interesting to just your perspective on that part.
Yeah. The things that I learned in the books, right, in classes, the theories, I think all of it is good, right? But when you're sitting in front of a live couple, really listening to their story and trying to figure out what's going to be most helpful, may not necessarily have come from what I've read. Maybe it comes from the experience that I've had in working with other couples, or just things that I've learned about relationships, as I maneuver life and listen to different people. So it's interesting. It's interesting to try and figure out what's most helpful, and how to really connect with both people in the relationship, right? Because I'm one person sitting in front of two people, and neither one of them can feel like I'm siding with the other. Sure. So it's cool work.
All right. And then just my last question on this topic.
Yeah.
Just as a profession, do you find it difficult turning it on and off your specialty, just interacting with people on the daily? Like,
do I find it hard to turn it off? I feel like I've been getting a lot better at that. It was really hard in the beginning, and I don't know, maybe I was watching something or talking. No, it was a conversation I had earlier today. Immediately, I was like, mental health. I was like, oh, no, stop. So I have this dialogue in my head when I'm interacting with people, and I may be triggered by something, but, I really got to rechannel myself and listen as a human interacting with another human, as opposed to a professional interacting with somebody. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I've gotten better at it. But at first, because I was really excited about learning what I was learning and practicing, I would do it all the time, just think professionally as I'm interacting with people.
Gotcha. So a funny thing just came to mind, just being an African background, and, a lot of your family members, I assume they grew up over back at home.
Yeah.
Have you ever had the experience you're like, let's say parents, for example, you're like, looking back at it, now that I know what I know, y'all need some help, or how do you approach that situation?
I remember one time, I think I was still in my graduate program. I told my dad, I'm like, I think you should go to therapy. I told him because, he just experienced a lot of loss in his family back to back. And I'm just like, I don't know how you're coping with all of this. It just feels heavy. And he was like, that's for y'all. That's for your generation. I'm fine. And he's, managed and figured it out. As much as I'm like, people need therapy, people also have a resilience to them. And they found a way to cope, whether it's right or wrong, I can't really say. Yeah. But if it works for you, then it's fine.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
It's just a discussion I know in the, the African and the African American community, just how important, therapy and all this other stuff is nowadays. But even in, let's say, a Nigerian household, and we look back a couple of generations, the type of trauma experience is not anything similar to what we've gone through. Like the Biafra War,
Right.
my grandparents, our parents went through it. Even some people our age, they went through wars in their local cities and stuff, and they came in like nothing happened. Colonialism, Europeans doing, we don't know how much, but it's not talked about in the community. It's just like, that's life. You go through it and
Yeah.
pushing.
And I think that's part of the resiliency, right? You can't afford to really sit in it and feel your feelings and think about it because it might be like paralyzing, for lack of a better term. And you have to continue with life. And, I think in our ways we do it too, right? If something tragic happens to us, it's really hard to just sit and feel our feelings because we got to go to work the next day, or we got to hang out with our friends, or, we got to take a shower, fill in the blank. But, it can be really hard, right? So part of me is like, they don't need therapy, but then another part of me is like, they do need therapy, right? I think we all need therapy. And, speaking to what you're speaking to as children of immigrants, I just think the transition of moving from one country to another is a lot on the family unit, right? There's so much adjusting that happens. And to be in a space where that's normalized and you can be comforted and you have the time to process your thoughts around the whole situation, like that's what therapy is.
That's true.
Yeah. Go ahead, Joey.
Just last question.
Yeah.
Just back to talking to family members about going to therapy. Have you ever had a bad experience that they reacted in a negative way? Because a lot of Nigerians can be over the top. Start doing.
Like,
all kind of things.
Have I had a Nigerian client?
Oh,
Or
no, like family members.
if I'm telling my family go to therapy, them reacting?
Or people friends or elders.
I don't think anybody's given me a bad reaction, actually. No, they just say no. And I'm like, okay, do you?
That's cool. Because I know back in the day, there used to be a kind of stigma. If you're going to therapy, it's quickly linked to, you got some psychotic issues or, you're crazy or weird or something like that.
Right.
So that's why I was wondering what's your experience?
Yeah, I don't recall there being a negative experience. You know what's crazy? I was in Nigeria in November, and there's this like school for mental health, right? And my cousin was saying somebody that she works with was seeing a psychologist. So I was really shocked, honestly. I'm like, this is the country that my parents come from. And, for a long time in Nigeria, there was that stigma, right? But it seems like there's been a shift. I don't know when or how it happened, but it's becoming more socially acceptable, I think individually we have to get over the, am I crazy? Is there something wrong with me? I think, people should go to therapy when they're having a hard time functioning in a way that they would like. Let me say that. Yeah.
And then I keep saying final question.
I know.
No, go ahead.
There's more. Go ahead.
Then another strong thing, within the continent, there's, faith-based solution versus clinical solutions and how to merge or separate the two.
Yeah.
And then just in terms of, you grew up here, you understand the mentality of, being from American mentality, raised in a Nigerian household. And I'm not sure you're back if you're Muslim, usually either Muslim or Christian coming from Nigeria, and just how to, merge or talk to people in that kind of sense. Like, this is what it is on this end of clinical science. This is what it is on this sense on the faith-based side. And if there's any merging of the two based off your experience.
Yeah, honestly, I think the union of the two provides the best support, right? Whether you see a counselor that's specific to your religion or not, having your spirituality be connected to the growth and the healing that you're doing, the clinical work that you're doing is very valuable, right? So whether it's, God, Allah, sorry, I'm blanking on like other, let me start over. Regardless of, you know, your spiritual background or the God that you worship, or whether you believe it's the universe, right? There is this interconnectedness and there is this power outside of you, right? It's very important to recognize. And I think when you can merge the two, the clinical work and the spiritual work, it's like, it's, you know what I mean? It's this. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think one of the most exciting thing about you is just you are African and a Black
Yeah.
woman therapist.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's a big deal. Right. Because when you do look at the field, it's kind of like you stand out.
Yeah.
A lot, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So based on your experience, and I think this is what Toby was inquiring about as well. What are some stereotype or like, you know, myth about Black folks or African in general that you want to name on a talk show? And then my follow-up will be like, you know, based on your experience, like what have you discovered?
Yeah. Yeah.
How do we sort of diffuse and like, you know, get away from some of these stereotypes so we could really see therapists in a way that's empowering?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I was going to say, and I'm cute and I'm fun. You know, people want to work with me. There's so many reasons that, you know, I'm different from maybe what somebody would think of as a general therapist, right? I don't know if you'd see a Black fun woman when you think of therapists, right? So I think, you know, that alone, representation matters very much, right? To get Black people specifically in the door, people of color, right? I'm also, you know, first generation American, right? Children of immigrants. So there are many identities that help my clients feel comfortable with me compared to somebody that they don't feel like they can identify with, you know, and maybe not wanting to work with that person. So I think, you know, there are many myths. Are you asking like myths that keep us from
from accessing,
accessing?
Oh yeah, you know, and approaching this in a way that is necessary?
Yeah. It's for white people is a big myth, right? Not believing it's for people that look like us. So the more we can share our stories or experiences about being in therapy, I think will help encourage others to do so. The more we normalize the pain in the African community and the Black community, people of color community, you know, there's a lot of things that we've had to deal with and we continue to deal with that is not normal. You know what I mean? It's a lot. The more we normalize that, you know, because there's so much trauma, it's shocking to me that people are like, oh, that's normal. All my friends experience that. And I'm like, and that's not good.
And I think it's also cultural, right? There's a sense like when you're African, like, you know, you're supposed to suppress some of these trauma, right? And I just feel like for us, vulnerability is seen as weakness. And it's just not just African culture, but it's also Black culture, right? And this goes further into what we're going to talk later about with your work with athletes, right? Why is vulnerability so difficult for us based on your experience and your work?
I think it's because we don't have the safe space to be vulnerable. You know, sometimes you can't control it. You're just vulnerable. And depending on how people react to it, it teaches you, can I keep doing this or can I not do this? And we learn from a very young age, right? From when we're children, we express ourselves in vulnerable ways. And depending on how the environment reacts to us, we then learn how to proceed.
Can you just elaborate that further? Like, what are some of these factors or things that you notice? Again, we're not sort of trying to be general here. This is all based on your knowledge and experience that contributing to this sort of like narrative of like, it's not okay to be vulnerable. Like, it's not okay to seek therapy. Like, what is contributing to this?
Yeah, so, you know, immediately I thought of our parents, but I by no means want to blame our parents for anything. I think all parents are great and they do their best, but it's hard to be a parent because you're also not only trying to take care of a child, you're taking care of yourself, right? Or whatever life circumstance that you find yourself in, right? There's a sandwich generation where you may also be taking care of your parents. So, for example, let's say mom or dad are overwhelmed with their life, right? If their child comes home from school and is sad because fill in the blank happened, depending on how mom and dad react to that, the child will learn, is it okay for me to be sad in front of my parents, right? If they're comforting, it'll teach them, yeah, I can come to my parents with things. If they're dismissive, if they don't even notice, vulnerability isn't safe in that environment. So that's just one example, right? And we can, as teenagers get older, or you like move into your teenage years, as you're having relational issues or you're stressing about what college to go to, all these are very vulnerable times in life, right? And depending on how your environment, maybe not just your parents, but your friends at school, the teachers at school, depending on what they say to you and how they respond to you. That's what I mean.
No, just to piggyback off of the question, and I guess one of the things, I guess, is universal a little bit. Like boys at a young age, you don't cry, you don't do this and that, and and the transition from boys to men, no pun intended.
Yeah.
You kind of are more engraved in that kind of mentality, and that also affects, back to your specialty, how you interact maybe with your significant others. Amongst men, it's less words need to be spoken about, the way things are dealt with. But, once you're in a relationship, being able to be expressive in that vulnerability is kind of another unwinding and an unlearning aspect also. So to my point, it's kind of like the same thing. You kind of learn how to do it, but then there's a point you have to unlearn because of different circumstances. And just in your experience within, well, I'm not sure how much confidentiality you have in here in terms of marriages and relationships, the way men react in marriage counseling, couple counseling versus how women are. So that dynamic is kind of different based off of how we're raised in terms of always having a safe space.
Yes. And I think that's a great point, right? Society, there's a social construction around the way you should be as a man, the way you should be as a woman, what's acceptable, right? But the reality is we're all human and we have varying degrees of emotional need, right? So somebody could be viewed as overly emotional as a woman, but if a man does the same thing, it's a problem, right? Or I guess like the man would be overly emotional and the woman would be praised for showing her emotion, as opposed to if you need to express yourself in whatever way, just feel free to do so. And what I've seen is that a lot of men really do struggle because they've been conditioned to believe that what they're feeling and going through isn't important, unfortunately, Yeah, it's hard for them to let it out. But when I have the men individually, it's like blows my mind, the vulnerability that I see in men.
Right.
That also kind of leads to just another, I'm not saying trending topic, but kind of the state of the world or the U.S. at the moment. So we are in Philly, North Philly specifically.
I'm like, the world is big.
So since the pandemic, or just since the past 10 years, there's been an increase in violence and crime, murder rates across the nation. And in Philly, especially since the pandemic, there's been a boost. And predominantly, you're seeing very young Black men from teenage years to maybe early 20s, latest, just, in that lifestyle and unfortunately passing away very early. And, just wondering, just in your perspective, what might be some of the societal or therapeutic need, I don't know the right word for it, that might contribute to the state that we're in right now?
Wow, that's a big question. What feels like the simplest answer is for fathers to be involved in the lives of their sons. and you're like, what's the correlation, right? A lot of the men that are engaging in violent behavior, right, are really looking for belonging and for somebody to say, I accept you, I love you, I want you. And they find it in the community that they've chosen to be a part of, right? So if they could find that in a positive, right? Because they're kids, right? They're very impressionable. So if you could find that in your father, if you could find it in, a very positive Black or male of color, I really think there'd be less violence in Philadelphia.
Right. And I think what you just shared, that was extremely powerful. I just want to make sure our viewers just take a moment to honestly soak that up, because I think that is really sort of literally the cause behind of all because the violence, the shooting, and all that, all these are byproducts, right?
Right.
So what you just named is literally, as a human being, we constantly looking for a circle to belong, right? And for those people who feel rejected, not accepted, they're going to have a certain reactions, right? So when we see this increase, it's almost like people are communicating, right? In a way,
Totally.
They conveying how they're feeling about the society that they live in, and also how that society is viewing them, right? So it's a lot to unpack based on what you just shared.
It's a lot. It's deep.
It's a lot. So, but I want to sort of redirect this based on the foundation here of you in the work of dealing with emotions, human beings' emotion, and it's people look at it as it's the type of work that they think it's easy, right? But I just want you to expand a little bit more on because I truly believe as a human beings, our emotion drive our actions.
Totally.
So can you talk a little bit about emotions and how it affect us in a way that could enlighten our viewers?
Yeah. Wait, people think the work I do is easy?
No, I'm not trying to say it.
Wow.
But I just think people concept of emotion, right? And we keep going back and forth between a man, what it means to be a man, right?
Right.
And what it means to be a woman, right? There's this concept women tend to be emotional, but men are also emotional. But I just think I wanted to really push further on what can you say about human emotions that could help us see it in a way that we haven't think about it?
Yeah. Okay, I can do that. I do think people take my work for granted whenever they're like, "Oh, a therapist is just a friend. I can just talk to my friend." And I'm like, that's not what we are, right? You may feel like I'm your friend, but we're not friends. Right? I'm trained to really listen for the places that you are stuck and to help you get unstuck. And, I think a great example is this gun violence. If I'm feeling angry, I want to go shoot somebody, right? Because that'll make me feel better. And there's so many different responses, actions to feeling angry or feeling sad or depressed or happy, or, there's so many responses that we can have. But to really understand the relationship between the two is powerful, right? If you want to change your behavior, it's not necessarily changing how you feel, but it's identifying the feeling and seeing what we can do with it, right? Instead of impulsively jumping to a behavior. I can be angry and then yell at you, or I can be angry, process that anger, and then have a civil conversation.
Right. Can you expand a little bit on that? Because I also want our viewers to walk away with some sort of tools here, or some sort of knowledge. If someone is angry, upset, or struggle with expressing their emotion, and this goes into a lot of the work you do from an individual or group level. What are some healthy ways for people to express their angers or their frustrations?
Yeah.
What are some of the best practices?
I really think the two most healthy and they're both forms of processing, right? So you can journal, as in writing about the situation that has caused whatever emotion that you're feeling. And there may be multiple emotions, right? I have a feelings wheel that I use with a lot of my clients, and it's very easy to find. You can Google feelings wheel PDF, and you'll get this wheel, and you might be able to pinpoint, okay, this is exactly what I'm feeling. Is it rage? Is it anger, frustration, sorrow, right? As opposed to just lumping it all in one. So journaling is a good way to process, and talking to somebody that you trust, right? Whether it's a vent session or whether they're like empathizing with you, validating your emotions. I don't think we can talk to anybody. But we need people that will listen to us. Yeah.
This is us again. It's important. Like I'm just writing these things down because I do know, like on a personal level, this is something that I know it's going to be helpful for me, and I'm hoping like our viewer will also know this is a helpful tool for them.
Yeah.
But sometimes people look on the social media. What's your thoughts on that? Like, you get a lot of these sometimes helpful tips on the social media about mental health and stuff. How do people could really? How can that be helpful for people? But also, how can those these social media things or advice can be harmful for people?
That's a great question. I feel like I can tell because I'm trained to know the difference, right? But for somebody who is just looking for support, there is a lot of misinformation out there, and it's unfortunate. I want to say maybe just check in with somebody that's actually like practicing. There's no reason. Actually, I've never done this before because I didn't think I've needed to, but I'm sure you could just DM the person or, figure out a way to chat with whatever page you're getting this information from, to just learn more as opposed to just taking their information, for face value. But, social media is interesting. I wish we didn't have it, if I'm being honest.
Right. No, I mean, we in the show. You should be honest. I mean, we want you to be real, be yourself on this talk show.
Yeah.
Because this is what this space is about. We talked a lot about safe space. This is our safe space, right? So please keep your mind.
Yeah.
Keep it real.
Yeah.
And feel free, if you need to use profanity too, that's okay.
I don't cuss.
Okay.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it.
Let's just keep it real here.
That's so funny.
Back to you, Toby.
Yeah, what kind of elements do you say, or what? So basically, why do you wish there wasn't social media?
It's okay. Gosh, this is hard. We have access to so much information, too much information at a very rapid. Like I can feel my eyes and my brain moving as I'm scrolling, right? I don't think that should be happening. And I don't know if you guys have similar experiences, right? I wake up and I get on Instagram and I'm like, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? As opposed to getting out of bed and starting my day, right? So there's this addictive property, for lack of a better term, on these social media sites, or about these social media sites. And the fire hydrant of information isn't good for our brains, right? The pace that the world is moving through social media is faster than what our brains have come to adapt to. Does that make sense? During these times? So it's actually causing more mental illness. Then I don't think it was ever intended to decrease mental illness. And we can say the purpose of it, I'm sure it started well intended, but it's really harmful to us. That's all.
Yeah, I think that people can fact check this. I think they said there's a correlation between our spend on social media and depression or something like that.
Yeah.
And there's a very adverse effect, especially with the younger generation, like our generation. We're in the pre-internet and post-internet era, while the upcoming generation is all internet.
Yeah.
You can get access whenever, and it's kind of, again, correct me if I'm wrong, there's a little more concentration of mental health issues within teens and all those coming up.
Yeah, it's it's sad, to see the increase of mental illness, but I'm torn because it also means job security for me. So, I'm like, the world will keep moving. I'll forever have a job, but I wish I didn't have a job. I wish my field didn't exist, So,
And then with everything you've, let me say, experienced or you've seen, within your field, what helps you stay grounded? Because some people, their cases might be
Too heavy.
extreme, and you're
Right.
like, man, I
Right.
need a break, or something like that. So, what helps you get through, your
Right.
daily activity?
yeah, that's a good question. There's a balance between, I'm thinking about this case, this client, this couple, whatever, so that I can be prepared the next time I see them. There's a balance between that and also recognizing I'm really just an instrument that helps them move along, right? But it's ultimately their choice, right? So there's freedom in that for me, right? There's only so much I can do, and I'm doing the best that I can. So, I can turn off my brain. And partially, they've become comfortable in their dysfunction. So whether they leave my room angry, crying, unresolved, whatever, they know how to soothe themselves, right? Because they've figured it out prior to coming to me, in the sense that we learn to function in dysfunction, right? So, I've come to a place where I'm like, there's only so much I can do, right? And sometimes I like really feel for people. I'm like, man, I wish they weren't going through this. And I think that's just hard to turn off, right? I'm human. I empathize, but it doesn't stop me from carrying on with my day. There's a boundary.
And then, can you talk about how you transition into starting your own company, Kingdom Collective?
Yeah. How did I start Kingdom Collective? So I was so frustrated in the work that I was doing, and I always wanted to be in private practice. So I was like, oh, I'll just start my own. That's my solution. That was pretty much it. That's what I thought. And, in 2017, 2018, I really started to look more into mental health in the world of athletics and what that looked like and how I could break into it. And there are so many opportunities, to work with athletes, but it's coupled with, do I have the experience, that these people are looking for, especially since I want to work with collegiate and professional athletes. So I was even finding it hard to break in there because I've only been practicing. I think at this point it's been like 7, almost 8 years, right? But they're looking for people with like 20 years of experience. I was like, I'll get there, but in the meantime, I can do my own thing.
Right. And why specifically you focus on athletes?
I think athletes are an underserved population. And they are viewed as superhuman, And I used to also, right? I grew up watching sports. I love watching football and basketball. And I'm like, at this age, I'm like, I can't believe I'm upset with you for not doing well. Like, what is my investment in this sport, right? And the way that people treat athletes because they didn't perform well, it just makes me so sad, right? And very rarely do athletes have a safe space to be able to process whatever's going on with them because so many people are just expecting them to perform.
That is true. I never pictured it in that area or in that lens. One thing, I'm not much of a soccer fan, but being around all these Africans, you hear a thing or two. I remembered, I think it was a Nigerian player or something like that. He missed like a penalty kick or something. And then, before he came back to Nigeria, they burned down his house. They threatened his family and stuff like that. And the how extreme fans can be sometimes is kind of crazy, just to say the least. And so their stresses are a little bit different from.
Yeah. And just imagine the same group of people would have behaved differently had he, made the goal.
Yeah.
Right.
It's crazy.
Right. And I just think, like, for me, I was an athlete, right? I was high school, college athlete, and so what you just shared like really resonated with me personally because I just think like being an athlete, it just says like you are conditioned to just like tough it up,
Right.
you know, and you hear that like you hear that language, it's almost become ingrained in you. But the funny thing about that is what you start to see like is like I think it's helpful, right? Because that's it's kind of pushes you to perform to get certain outcome because being an athlete, like you're very structured, you get that sense of discipline, and that discipline could sort of like helpful to you when you get to certain space, like in the professional space, right? But I also think like it could also be hurtful or harmful to you when you start to engage with other people like in a relationship, right? Because then you when you have an issue and someone to try to express it to you how they feel, you kind of like are not you condition not to express your emotion. You kind of become more like solution oriented, and the next thing you know, this is what a lot of athletes really struggle with, expressing how they feel. And sometimes we've seen so many times in the media like some of the like athletes that we could name right now who have really express their emotions in a way that had a traumatic, like it was so like it's almost like it shocked the world, but it also was a moment of like vulnerability for these athletes because they build up inside of them and they reacted, whether that is with their significant others, it could turn physical.
Yeah.
Like, so can you talk a little bit more about those? Because we continue to see these in the media, and it's not just an athlete too, but we've seen it with the actors, right? Certain actors where they reacted in a way where everyone was shocked, but at the same time, as a therapist, like when you see those things, like, what was your response?
Oh my gosh, I'm kind of embarrassed that I'm blanking on
Is
his
there
name.
any particular example of an athlete?
Yeah. I'm thinking of
that
this
you wanna
guy,
share?
Cheetah, Tyreek Hill.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm like, what is this man's name?
Right.
I don't remember what year this was, but I remember seeing
What's
that
his name again? Sorry, I didn't hear.
Tyreek Hill.
Tyreek Hill, okay.
He, oh my gosh, I'm blanking. I think he beat his child. I think there was like allegations of child abuse, right? Beating his child or his girlfriend. I don't remember. But football players in general, right? Their aggression is praised on the field. That's what you want, right? But you also expect that same person to be able to turn it off without the tools of learning how to keep it in one place, you know, and not having it be in the other place. But like you were saying about relationships, right? Like you learn that, like, let's say coaches, for example, a lot of coaches yell at their athletes. It's okay for your coach to yell. You're not going to talk back to your coach. You know, you may be upset and go talk to your teammate about it, but you don't talk back to your coach. If somebody in your personal life is raising their voice at you, all of the aggression pent up from your experience with your coach might come out there, or your frustration with not performing at the level you wanted to, you know, may come out on somebody else that, you know, it's just like, where's all of this coming from? I just wanted to have a conversation. But also, right, this vulnerability piece, if your partner's being overly emotional and you don't know what to do with that, you may be like, I need to go somewhere else, or I need to end this relationship because I don't have the capacity, you know, right now. So really the work that I want to do is not only help athletes process, but really change the environment, you know, that they are working in, right? But I also think, I mean, to your point, the discipline that you learn, there are benefits to the environment. So I don't think everything needs to change, but there does need to be a balance of, this person is also human. How can we grow and develop the human, not just their athletic ability?
Right. That's a good point.
Yeah.
And how does that tie into, so you also have a podcast, blanking on the name, forgive me for that. How does that also tie into helping, I believe that's also targeted to athletes also and coping?
Yes. The name of my podcast is Clear Minds, Full Hearts. I love it. It makes me so happy. A play on the Friday Night Lights phrase, clear eyes, full hearts. Clear eyes. Let's just cut all of it. I'm like, what is the name of this? Anyway, okay. Play on Friday Night Lights. So on the podcast, I have collegiate athletes talk about their experience. Well, they're retired collegiate athletes. They'll talk about their experience while in their athletic program. And I think I want two people to listen to that. One, current athletes that can relate to their experience, but also those in the athletic departments can hear the vulnerability of a student that could have come through their program, and really challenging athletic departments to change things, right? And provide more mental health resources for their students. So that's what it's about.
All right. So you have two, I guess, businesses going on side by side. What's like the greater vision or plan for both of them?
Yeah. So with Kingdom Collective, the hope is that that becomes a group practice, right? Where there are many clinicians that focus on the mental health of athletes. And with Clear Minds, Full Hearts, it's just to help athletes in the athletic community connect to mental health resources.
And you didn't, I don't believe you explained why you chose the name Kingdom Collective.
Oh, so, it was hard to find a name that felt good to me, that wasn't already taken. So Kingdom is the middle 6 letters of my last name, right? And I was like, oh, this feels very personal and I like it. And I think it has a nice ring to it. And Collective, for the sake of, right, this is going to be a community of people.
That sounds dope.
Yeah.
And with that, if in a perfect world, right?
Yeah.
Who are the kind of clienteles you like to come through your practice?
Yeah, I would love individual athletes and couples with an athlete in them.
Let's put some name on it, like a LeBron James.
Let's put some names out there. No, names don't matter. Yeah, if you're an athlete and you want to work with me, we can work together.
Oh, gotcha. That's very humble.
Yeah. Well, because first, even if there was a LeBron James that came through, I couldn't tell anybody, which feels frustrating, because of confidentiality. But I don't want you to come to me because I'm going to brag or so I can brag about my client list. You know what I mean? I don't really care about that. I genuinely just want to help athletes.
It's good to know.
It's interesting, Toby, that you name like LeBron James, because I just feel like we idolize like athletes in a way, right? And you're just looking at this as like from a basic level, like anyone who's an athlete. But is there like specific sports too that you focus on? Does the sports itself impact the athletes differently? Or do you notice like the issues that these athletes are facing are consistent regardless of the sports that they play?
Yes, I do think part of it is where you come from, right? People that play basketball tend to come from different places than people that play tennis. So I think that's a factor, right? Your background, and also I think the sport is important, but I don't know if that's necessarily a correlation to the mental health stuff, right? Okay. The sport that you play, I'm not sure yet, right? We can say it's a sport, or we can say it's your background, but I really think your background is more important.
Right.
Yeah,
that's good.
I think this is my last question here. I think we got a lot of good information from you. Very insightful. So, in terms of, I'm not sure how your clientele list looks like. I'm assuming it's predominantly Black, just because we live on this side.
Because of where we live. Yeah, yeah.
But in terms of, let's say, the underlying issues that you see across your clientele, what are some key takeaways you think everyone should have in order to cope with the everyday livings? If you see any correlation.
Yeah, so many people are...
Before you answer, are you going to charge us?
I know, right? I'm like, I'll make you think about good stuff. No.
You can send the bills to Toby.
That's so funny. No, this is good. I mean, imagine what happens in a session where I do charge, right?
Right.
No, this is good stuff. So many people are lonely. So many people are lonely. It's crazy to me. Even if you have people around you, right? There's a saying you could still be lonely. So I think it's so important to have deep, meaningful, enriching relationships where you're like genuinely connected, and not to have like a large number of them, one, two, three, more than one, because you don't want to you don't want to put too much pressure on that relationship. But yeah, you know, tribe, family, connection, so important.
Do you feel like the loneliness is based on lack of having a safe place,
Yeah,
ability to connect?
totally. As I'm saying, it's like, well, how do you do that?
Yeah.
So I have 10 people around me, but how do I decide who I'm going to have deep connection with? And vulnerability is so scary, and it's such a risk, right? Because I can share something personal with you, but you may not be the right person. I should have told, right? And then I can tell somebody else and they're the right person. So part of it is trial and error, right? Let me give you some information, see how you deal with it. Can I resolve conflict with you in a healthy way? Those are the things that allow us to have depth in our relationships. Yeah. So you got to do it. You just got to be brave. It takes a lot of bravery to be vulnerable,
I think one thing that just happened from a global level that changes people's perception of therapy, because I feel like now therapy is becoming like it's becoming part of our daily conversation now, right? It's almost kind of like now it's becoming cool, right? Or you talk to your friend, you see a therapist, oh, that's great. Where do you find your therapist? It's becoming part of our conversation because the pandemic happened, right? And I think pandemics was a huge part of that. Like for me too, pandemics were one of those like I had an epiphany. I'm like, oh no, I need to focus on my mental health right now, right? So, like, let's talk a little bit about the impact of like the pandemics. And we still sort of like, hopefully we coming out of it now, but it's still fresh in our like memories. Like, what was the impact of like the pandemics, and what do you notice is the changes now towards like therapy and moving forward?
Yeah, I remember I was in Texas at my friend's wedding where like the mandates of the gatherings started. I think it was like March of 2020, right? The 11th or the 12th. I remember where I was when I found out, that it was a pandemic now. So I came back to Philly. We weren't going to work for like 2 weeks. Everybody's working from home. But when they extended the amount of time that we couldn't go out, I was going crazy, right? I'm a person that wants to be around people. I want to go out. I want to do things. Like I want social life.
Right.
And I was living with I had two roommates at the time, and they loved it. They were relishing. And, the mandates will all stay home and, enjoy ourselves. And, one of the thoughts that I had was people are going to kill themselves. Like suicide is going to go up because how can we exist in a world where we can't touch each other, right? Touch is so healing. It's so powerful. And sure enough, people were killing themselves, and it was so sad. And it just, I understood the physical health risk, and the need to be safe. But it was like, how are we going to maintain our mental health in this type of environment? And I'm not surprised there's been an increase in mental health need, right? And seeking out that, because I don't like the term, right? We were just driving ourselves crazy, or we were going crazy, but literally that's just what felt like was happening, right? People were forced to rethink the way they live their lives, right? You couldn't go, I guess you could go on a run, but you can't go to the gym anymore. There's no social outlets. You can't go to the movies. Like there's no shopping. I guess you can order stuff online, but you know what I mean? Like so many things were restricted, and it was just very hard to sit alone with yourself and your work and your thoughts.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I just like, what are some of the takeaway that we have after the pandemics? You name all of this, like, and I think we all felt it, right?
Yeah.
Like, and some people come out of it. Some people come out of it okay, and some people. But what are some lessons that we learned from the impact of the pandemics on our mental health, or like on our life in general, that you want to share with like our viewers?
Yeah, fresh air and vitamin D are so important. And right, without the pandemic, I think that's why we also have seasonal affective disorder.
Yeah, especially this
It's,
time. Like,
it's starting. The less sunlight, it just really affects our mood. Anyway, so I think being out in fresh air, enjoying that, and engaging in some sort of activity that's truly freeing, right? So whether you could be at home and do this, right? So whether it's like working out or being creative in some way, somewhere where your brain is genuinely relaxing as opposed to having to work, right? Some people might be scrolling on social media or watching TV, but your brain isn't actually relaxing during those times. So finding an activity where your brain can just chill.
Right. And I think for me, like one thing that I do that I find so helpful, because I work with kids, like so my day is like so intense.
Yeah.
So, but one thing that I have been so helpful for me, like just sitting there for like 10 minutes, not doing anything.
Wow.
So sometimes I step outside, and that's why I'm like I might experience a little bit of seasonal depression right now because the weather's changing. I'm a huge summer person because I would just go outside and I would just sit there, turn everything off for like 10 minutes, and I just felt like it's like I'm a whole new person when that happens, right? It's like you said, get some fresh air. That's something like I wanted to share. Like it's just that moment to yourself. It's really important. Why is it so hard for some people to take a moment to themselves? And like when some people want to have this moment to themselves or their lonely time or me time, why do we feel like why do they feel under attack? Like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. So
this concept of self-care, right? That's what I'm trying to jump into.
Yeah. If I'm watching TV and scrolling on my phone at the same time, my brain is so occupied. It's not spending time with itself, right? In the example that you gave, just to go sit outside, there's no distractions. Right. It's just you, your body, and your brain. You can feel the things. You can hear yourself thinking, right? And that is too much for some people. And I think until we train ourselves to be okay with that, it's too much for all of us, right? I was going to say meditation and mindfulness, but not in the like, let's sit down for 10, 30 minutes, to like clear your mind. But that practice of you just going outside for 10 minutes, that is mindfulness. That's a form of meditation. Creating a space where your brain can really just decompress and it's gonna think. That's what your brain does. You know what I mean? But there are just so many scenarios, and your brain can be moving at a pace that people just are uncomfortable with, which I understand. But it's nothing to be afraid of.
Right. But it's what do you say to those people who constantly want to use the word like, I need me time? Like,
well, I hope it's genuine you time. That's all. Take all the time. Take it all. Do whatever you want. Right. But as long as your brain is decompressing and you're relaxing, we all need it. I mean, we all need it.
Right. And my push is, when do you think that people need to realize like it's important to have that self-care? Especially like in the professional world.
Yeah.
Because I feel like I talk to a lot of my friends, they're like, I'm working all the time. I never have time for myself. What do you say to these people in order for them to not get to the point where it's almost like their work and their lives it's just almost like becoming like so affecting their mental health to the point, like, why is it important for them to realize like, hey, if you're feeling this way about whether it's work, like ask for a moment to take a break from it?
Yeah, there are signs. I was going to say if you feel like you're losing your mind, but I think we can all tell when our performance is slowing down or when we're really distracted, or when it's like, I don't even care anymore. Those are the times where you need to step away, take a break. But I also think it's hard for different groups of people. It can be hard to to think it's okay for me to take a break. I mean, the answer is it's always okay. You might upset some people, but that's just life. You know what I mean?
Right.
We upset people all the time.
Right. And
It'll be fine.
And I think the reason why I asked is like, as a result of the pandemic, what we seen was a significant transition out of like workforce, right? We've seen a lot of people like leave the workforce, like especially in education. There's a teacher shortage going on right now.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And when you talk to a lot of the teachers, it's related to like they talking about the work is like mentally exhausted, right?
Yeah.
So and then you talk to a lot of people like switch job, and a lot they had to do with like I want to be in the workspace that cares about my mental health, right? But what I'm saying is like when we don't really take these like necessary steps, we see the impact that they have, and we've seen it already based on like how people are like really putting their job left to right.
Yeah. I remember different times in the pandemic where I'm like, oh, this is nice. I'm working from home. I can work for 2 hours here, take a break. But it also meant I could work at like 7, 8, 9 o'clock at night, right? And if I was going into the office, I would never stay there that late. So people were genuinely overworking themselves for a few years, right? And now you want me to come back into the office? Like, it is so hard. When I had to start going back in to the office for work, I'm like, what are you doing to me, right? I used to take naps in the middle of my work day, but I can't take a nap at work. So this transition has been very, very difficult, and people are just mentally drained, and especially those that had kids or if they were taking care of family and loved ones at home. Like, not only am I doing my job, but I'm functioning in a secondary role, to this other person in my house.
Right. So I guess my question is like, what advice do you have for these people if they're in that space, they really want to seek this help? Like, how should they go about it?
They want to seek therapy?
Or they want to like have like in their workspace, they want to just ask for a break to focus on their mental health. Like, what's the best way to approach this? Because sometimes we have these conversations through friends, but what's the best practice?
So if I'm an employee and where I am is great, I can say to my boss, this is what's going on with me, right? You can give as much detail or as little detail as possible, but this is what's going on. If they are a good boss, they can connect with that, and that's my hope, right? I know not every environment is like that. But the reality is your boss is also losing their mind, for lack of a better term, right? Everybody's happy. This is a universal experience, right? So if you're like, well, this person is staying at work, or, my boss might be upset at me, or I've taken too many days off. Whether people are taking care of themselves or not, we all need to take care of ourselves. So you should just do it. You know what I mean? I hope that like helps, right? Like,
No, it's
your boss is losing their mind too.
Right.
They're just not telling you about it.
It's just huge, because I just feel like we're going through a very, it's a very interesting time right now.
Yeah.
It's about like how we see ourselves and like how we see ourselves in the workspace. I'm just, and
can you even afford to take time off work, right? Do you have paid time off? Are you an hourly employee and you don't get paid time off? There's so many factors that go into making sure we take care of ourselves. The United States is not structured in a way that encourages us to take care of ourselves. So it's challenging.
Yeah, it is. And that's why like it's so great, Ayo, to have you on our talk show today, because I do feel like this is something like I know that I needed to hear today, and I hope like the knowledge and experience and tips that you share on our talk show today also resonated with our viewers, because at the end of the day, we're all human beings and everybody's going through something all the time. You might think that you're going through something, but the most important thing is it's important for us to have this safe space and and how you find what's safe for you is different from how I find what's safe for me.
Totally.
Right. But at the end of the day, I have great respect for the work that you do, being a therapist. It's amazing.
Yeah, thank you.
And we get into the home stretch right here. Toby, do you have any additional questions?
No.
Oh, you know. Okay. So I know we be talking a lot about some deep stuff. Do you have like any shout out that you want to give out on the talk show?
Shout out to I have to shout out my family. I think they are great people.
Right.
They're crazy. They drive me crazy, but I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for them. I really appreciate their support and the way that I was raised. Yeah, right. And I appreciate the community that I have here in Philadelphia, the way they take care of me and allow me to take care of them. Yeah, that's it. And I don't know, I feel this pressure to shout out my fiance. You know, I think he's the best human being I've ever met in my life.
Hey, all right.
Yeah, and he's such a great support.
That's amazing.
I appreciate him.
Good. Well, we happy for you. We excited for you, Ayo.
Thanks.
This is the last question. So if there's like a 13-year-old version of Ayo sitting in front of you right now, given everything you've been through, given everything that you know, and given what you do now, what would you say to her?
I would say, she probably won't understand this, but I would say that life is genuinely a journey, right? I think we use that phrase a lot, but it's like, it's a ride. There is no destination. It's ever evolving. It's very nuanced. And it's enjoyable most of the time. Yeah.
That was deep.
Yeah, that's what I would say to her, you know?
That was deep. All right, we're going to close it out with that. I will, if people want to find you, you know, I know a lot of my friends are always like, where can I find a therapist? Where can I find a Black therapist? Yeah. Right? So I like, let our viewers know, like, where can they find you and where can they learn more information about it's just an incredible work that you do. I don't know how you even do it. You, a couple of therapists, individual therapists, you got your own podcast, and you got other two businesses. Like, I don't know if that got nothing to do with you being Nigerian. But at the end of the day, I'm like, yo, she's a beast. Well, how can people find more, get more information about your work?
You can, the easiest way to probably find me is Googling Kingdom Collective. It's KINDUM Collective. It'll lead you to my website and you can reach out to me there. You can also find me on Instagram, Akindumila. We can throw that hashtag somewhere. To give you guys easy access to me, but that's how you find me.
That's it. So guys, make sure you check Ayo's out. She's incredible. She's doing a great work. She's also a very cool person. I meant by that 100%. She's really cool to hang out with.
Thanks.
She got a lot of friends. I don't know how someone at your level, because sometimes you start losing friends real quick, but you just, every time I see you, you just have more friends. I'm like, Ayo, how do you?
That is so funny.
How do you keep having more people, right?
Oh my gosh.
Like,
I need to lose some.
Yeah. I don't know how you keep track of all of them and stuff like that.
Yeah. I enjoy being social,
Right.
and not lose some in a bad way, but as we get older, it's just harder to maintain all of those connections.
Right. Absolutely.
But, you know.
Jollof rice.
Yeah.
Jollof rice.
Yeah. Wait, why are you saying that? You have some for me?
We're going to close it out with this. Which country?
Oh, no.
Again, I want you to, again, check your lenses here.
Okay, I'm ready.
Which country has the best jollof rice? All right. Again, you got Senegal, Nigeria, Ghana. Liberia also has jollof rice.
They do make jollof rice.
They do make jollof rice. But we want you to be honest here, and it's okay. We will not take your Nigerian card.
If I don't say
if you don't
Nigeria.
say
Nah, I will.
Nigeria.
I will.
Toby and Aki,
Oh my
Toby and Aki are giving you the eye.
But no pressure, though.
No pressure.
No pressure.
Who has the best jollof rice? Nigeria for sure.
Oh. All right, Nigeria.
You don't think so? What do you think? What are your thoughts?
Oh no. I'm just asking questions.
Yeah. Okay.
Your response is what's important. At the end of the day, thank you for your response. So
You're welcome.
Nigerian jollof it is.
Yeah.
Right? Cool. Well, thank you. We appreciate you.
Yeah. My pleasure. This is great. Thanks for having me.